U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital could have been joyful news for Israel. But it's no coincidence that Israel is the only country in the world whose capital hasn't been recognized by the international community. Jerusalem's status remains a core issue in the negotiations for a final status agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. In this sense, disrupting the status quo in the world's most explosive city is a poison gift to the Israeli and Arab peace camp. It's hard to understand how such a move fits with Trump's declarations about his desire to bring about peace in the region, a feat his predecessors in the White House failed to achieve. Trump boasted that he didn't follow in the footsteps of Bill Clinton, George W. Bush and Barack Obama, who did not change U.S. policy toward Jerusalem. But previous administrations' refusal to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital did not stem from hostility to Israel or excessive sympathy for the Muslims. These administrations heeded the advice of the National Security Council and Israeli defense officials, who warned that a policy change regarding Jerusalem would sabotage the peace process. The decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital plays into the hands of radical Arab groups, which don't miss an opportunity to portray the two-state solution as deception, and portray the leaders of Egypt and Jordan, the only Arab states that recognize Israel, as collaborators with the enemies of Islam. The joy of right-wing and centrist leaders is short-sighted. Violating the status quo in Jerusalem, like expanding the settlement enterprise in the West Bank, is moving Israel further from the only possible solution, the two-state solution, and increasing its isolation in the world. Woe is the country that needs the support of a leader like Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte. We've got more newsletters we think you'll find interesting. Click here. Please try again later. If the Prime Minister were a responsible leader, he wouldn't have called on other countries to follow the United States and the Philippines. Instead, he should ask Trump to take steps to advance negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians, part of which would consist of recognizing West Jerusalem as Israel's capital and East Jerusalem as the Palestinian state's capital. The above article is Haralid editorial, as published in the Hebrew and English newspapers in Israel. Page 2. Israel has no better ally than Saudi Arabia. It fights Hezbollah and overthrew the Lebanese prime minister who had lived in peace with that organization for a year. There is no other country in the world, including the United States, that acts with such resolve against Iran. Saudi Arabia even went to war in Yemen, not for the Yemenis, who as far as Riyadh is concerned could die of starvation, but to block Iran's influence. To really understand the Middle East, subscribe to Haaretz. Saudi Arabia has warned Hamas against renewing its ties with Tehran and is pressing Washington to come out of its coma and act against the Iranian threat. It seems as if Saudi Arabia would be happy to have Israel join the Sunni axis. Good for Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who dared to get rid of several ministers in his battle against corruption and isn't afraid to confront the Saudi religious oligarchy. Saudi Arabia is the dream of the Jewish state. Its behavior toward Iran makes mincemeat out of the axiom behind Israel's security strategy, namely that all Arab states seek to destroy it, but in return Saudi Arabia reinforces Iran's status as the ultimate enemy. Israel has secret contacts with Saudi Arabia, senior minister reveals. We've got more newsletters we think you'll find interesting. Click here. Please try again later. One might expect that such an alliance with an Arab power that sees eye to eye with Israel regarding its greatest enemy would demand some serious consideration of Saudi interests in the Israelo-Palestinian arena, for example, to revive the Saudi peace initiative, which calls for Arab normalization with Israel in return for withdrawing from the territories. No harm would be done if Israel made a gesture toward the kingdom and offered to begin negotiating with the Palestinians on the basis of that initiative, and even invite Riyadh to mediate. It wouldn't be unreasonable to try to form an Arab coalition made up of Egypt, Jordan, the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia for this purpose. After all, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu never fails to boast of the quality of the relations that he has managed to develop with Arab countries, even those that have no peace treaty with Israel. The alliance with Egypt is working well along the southern border, and there is quiet and excellent cooperation with Jordan, while the UAE has recently become a silent partner. On the face of it, there could be no better combination of forces for the state of Israel. The problem is that even an alliance of interests with Saudi Arabia has a fatal flaw. It requires that Israel pay too heavy a political price. Israel believes it is permitted to cooperate with Arab states against common enemies, but not in return for a chance at real peace. The enormous security and economic benefits that would derive from a diplomatic process that has the participation of anti-Iranian Arab states is apparently worthless in Israeli eyes. It prefers to pay the economic and security costs of taking care of 500,000 settlers, not to mention the collapse of Israeli democracy. An alliance with Saudi Arabia or other Arab states? Only if it's free. And thus, while Israel cheers when a ballistic missile is fired from Yemen on the Saudi capital, and celebrates the resignation removal of Lebanese Prime Minister Saad Hariri, because it sees both as incentives for intensifying the struggle against Iran, it prickles like a porcupine when anyone mentions the Saudi peace initiative. Israel is assuming that the common enemy will make the kingdom and other Arab countries forget that abomination called the peace process. In the 7 years that have passed since the Arab Spring and the 3 years since the Islamic State seized control of lands in Syria and Iraq, Middle Eastern alliances and coalitions have been shifting like the colors in a kaleidoscope. Those who know how to exploit opportunities, like Russia, Iran and Turkey, will gain diplomatic capital. Such an opportunity now lies before Israel. But Israel has learned the Palestinian lesson well. It never misses an opportunity to miss an opportunity.